Jai Hind, folks. This is Bob with BBD. News with geopolitical views. I've not covered it for a whole week. So a lot of bits and pieces, lots of moving parts across the world, Middle East, by Joe Biden, our neighborhood, Nepal, Myanmar. Lots of stuff has gone down, even Sri Lanka, and the port deal. So let's see. Let's just try and join some dots if we can. The first is Myanmar, right? Myanmar, as you know, has had a coup. The general Ming has taken over, and it's interesting to note that what I'm getting out of there, like for example, no matter what we do, right? It's a funny thing, right? Aung San Suu Kyi had suddenly become the bad person in Myanmar and had lost the favor of the entire West, right? Now the question is, now the West is kind of stuck. Now, do they support this coup? They didn't support her because they figured of her action, hardcore action against the Rohingyas, right? So it's kind of a funny situation. I find this could be a positive for her because now the West has no other recourse if they want democracy back is to support her. So it's extremely interesting. And why did the general do what he did at this point of time? A lot of people are saying maybe at the insistence of China, but maybe not. If you remember, the general who's taken over was just recently met by India's chief for the first time in a combined form of the chief of the army staff and the foreign secretary had both met him. So what kind of messaging is going on? India obviously has got to play its cards right. It can't really jump on. I mean, it's made its position very clear as far as supporting democracy. But at the same time, it understands that Myanmar is critical for the Indo-Pacific to keep China out. It ain't going to happen without Myanmar. For India, for India's interest, because India is the key part of the Indo-Pacific, Myanmar has a far different connotation, and it's danger right up front and close. Unlike the naysayers and the democratic flag flyers of the United States or European Union. For India, it's like up close and in its face. It's a clear and present danger. So India's position is obviously going to be very different than the rest. And that's why it says here, India plays key role in shaping UNSC statement on Myanmar. India has made a significant contribution in shaping a balanced statement by the United Nations Security Council on Myanmar, which has been backed by China. Interesting. Here was another one. UN West voice alarm amid coup fears in Myanmar. This was before the coup happened. Then there was breaking news in the New York Times which said Myanmar's military announced a one-year state of emergency, asserting its grip on the country with a coup against its fledgling civilian government. But the question is, the civilian government anyway didn't have much favor with the West, right? What does Avinash Paliwal write? The end of Myanmar's tryst with democracy. He says the so-called conservative faction epitomized by Min Aung Hlaing is suspicious of civilian leaders, especially Suu Kyi, castigated by the West for their actions in Rakhine State, and equally wary of China's overbearing influence. This faction values the Tatmadaws' political superiority and vision of Bamar Buddhist-dominated Myanmar above all. So here's a question. So nobody should worry that this guy is doing it at the behest of the Chinese. He's as suspicious of Chinese. In fact, Suu Kyi was going towards China because she'd been shunned by the West. So he didn't like that either, right? The Suu Kyi detained as army grabs power in Myanmar, and as you've noted, lots of demonstrations despite arrest, right? And Suu Kyi's party demands her release, recognition of victory. There was this note on coup in Myanmar. This is all over the place. It said a balanced, and India actually has to have a balanced outreach to the generals demanding democracy restoration is warranted. Absolutely true. Then it says Myanmar coup puts halt to democratic transition. Well, it really wasn't essentially a democratic transition. It was like a semi-democratic experiment, right? And there's pressures on Biden Those circumstances arriving not only put the future Myanmar's democracy movement in question, but add another pressing issue for Biden's administration eager to reorient US policy towards Asia. And I think here India has to play absolutely a critical role, because as G. Parthasarathi writes, Quad nations will achieve nothing by giving sermons to Myanmar, and he's absolutely right. There are regular exchanges of visits between the army chiefs of the two countries and between their foreign offices. But the October 3rd visit to Myanmar was the first occasion, as I pointed out, of a joint visit by Indian Army's chief and foreign secretary, who then jointly held meetings with the commander-in-chief of the Myanmar Armed Forces, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing. And that's the guy who's taken over. The military ties were expanded recently when India provided the Myanmar Navy with its first submarine. A Myanmar presence in the Bay of Bengal would always be welcomed by India. He says, under American pressure on Myanmar, internal affairs would only push Myanmar against its own will into a closer embrace of China. Since India is the only member of the Quad located in the region, the other members of the Quad need to be sensitized about the need to avoid pushing Myanmar into a closer Chinese embrace, because this is the absolute important part, folks, and that's about Myanmar. India has to play it balanced, and I think it's got it right by playing its cards in the UNSC. Now it's got to work with the United States to make sure that Myanmar is not put out in the cold again. And I think that's possible because there is a conflict even in the United States. Do they support Aung San Suu Kyi, which they had stopped supporting? Do they support the general? So they are kind of confused. India should lead the way. And in the latest discourse by President Biden at the State Department, very clearly says America is back. Biden vows new era in his first foreign policy speech. President signals aggressive approach to China, and so Russia, China, music to the ears, Russia, iffy. End support for Saudi campaign in Yemen. Flux again in the Middle East. Taiwan continues to have a problem, as they say here. China says expelled US warship in the South China Sea. Because that area has been a buzz. Taiwan, China, US fighters both entered defense zone. Lots of challenges facing Biden. So here says Seema Sirohi, Biden signals on Asia so far so good. First, Blinken telling take on China. He went beyond the call of duty, as it were, and agreeing with his predecessor Mike Pompeo's parting shot that Chinese oppression of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang was genocide. Who said the word minus China and perhaps Germany? Pompeo apparently arrived at the genocide designation after a year-long review. Okay. NSA Sullivan's public remarks have also been strong. He said last week the administration was prepared to impose costs for Chinese actions in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, and for the bellicosity of threats against Taiwan, he promised the administration. Wow, we'll speak with clarity. Well, that was happening. What do you have here? First Indo-US combat drill of Biden era in Rajasthan next week. Exercise will boost ops against terror. Important, and again in Rajasthan facing Pakistan. But this is something that I've said India needs its feet on the ground. We're just taking this independent foreign policy just too far away when we know it's never been independent, right? No blanket waiver on S-400. Urge India to avoid Russian deals, United States. I also urge India to avoid this S-400 deal because it's wasted money, as I've said on and again and again. Biden admin slams China, stands by India. Couldn't get any clearer. But Pakistan has cut its own nose to spite. Cut its nose to spite its own face. What does it say? Court frees man accused of journalist Pearl's killing. Oh God! Why would they go about doing that now? So just when they were thinking that they were, maybe they're thinking in a better negotiating position, but I don't think so. Daniel Pearl murder case. Omar Sheikh to walk free after SC reports. Pak SC confirms decision to release Pearl murder accused. What? How dumb can Pakistan be, right? US outraged after Pak court orders Sheikh's release. Obviously they're going to be totally upset. US dials up pressure on Pakistan over Daniel Pearl's murder. And about, that's playing into India's hand. The US seeks custody of Omar Sheikh for Pearl murder trial. Since the US has released many others, they should do this too. And as Yashwant Raj said, and this plays into India's hand, US must take a call on terror haven Pakistan, and this makes it totally easy. India calls out Pakistan on religious freedom, duplicitous because we seem to have lost our own freedoms. But what's happening in China launches second advanced warship for Pakistan Navy. China continues to be trouble for India along with Pakistan. Folks, more in our neighborhood, Bangladesh Foreign Secretary to discuss PM's visit and ties. He was on a 3-day visit. But when you juxtapose this against this news, right? Himanta, Congress electoral tsunami can come only in Bangladesh, not in riverine Assam. Now this is kind of strange. This is what I say. It's going to be really difficult for this Manta or Samantha or Himanta to pull himself out of this Bangladesh bogey, and that's going to really have a negative effect on our only good relationship, that is Bangladesh. It continues trouble in Nepal. Oli, the communist, turns to Hindu rituals with ion poles. Now this is going to be the funniest turnaround, right? However, he's trying to show force. Nepal PM Oli addresses huge rally, defends decision to dissolve House. In front of Royal Palace, he says monarchy will never return. That's actually a message to India. India should stop playing the monarchy card, right? Lanka also facing trouble for us, facing protests. Lanka scraps India port deal, offers another project. Well, I'm not sure if Delhi is going to accept that, right? Delhi to Colombo, honor pact on India-Japan project. And Japan also showed its displeasure very, very significantly with the Japanese statement. What's happening in our buddies in Afghanistan? And this is important news now that should change our positioning in Afghanistan a wee bit. Foreign troops to stay on in Afghanistan beyond May deadline. Foreign troops to stay in Afghanistan beyond deadline. This is what NATO sources say. Biden says Biden administration will review deal with Taliban White House. Now, what's India's endgame? And this is important, as what written by Avinash Paliwal. Decoding India's move in Kabul. Given India's security challenge today, it is entirely possible that Doval's visit is a signal to Pakistan that latter is likely to inherit a costly, violent, and ultimately discretionary mess in Afghanistan if it continues to pursue revisionism. Such signaling is buttressed by India's belief that even if the US leaves lock, stock, and barrel, which now it's not, neither Iran nor Russia, despite their alliance with China and engagement with the Taliban, would prefer an Islamic emirate in Afghanistan. China is also losing the plot, folks. It's already, like I said yesterday, in the foreign policy is losing its plot. Offering India space to maneuver and influence the outcome of Afghan wars over the next 6 to 12 months. Hear this. Saleh's unsettled tweet. Had a pleasant meeting with NSA Ajit Doval of India. We discussed the enemy. Guess who's the enemy? It was an in-depth discussion. Therefore, more must be read for what it is. A real continuing challenge to Pakistan. That is what is important, folks. And what's happening here? Eye on China, India, woos Madagascar and Comoros. Stuff going crazy in Baghdad. US airstrike kills IS commander in Iraq days after twin blasts. Now, what's happening with the Indian and with the vaccine, right? What does China have to do? Unfortunately, China to speed up export of vaccine to Pakistan. Embarrassing and totally embarrassing. The Chinese vaccine is not turning out to be that useful. The Russians is. Russia's Sputnik vaccine 91.6 effective. Now everybody's saying that. Really good. And Pakistan has made it to India's list. India made Covishield part of Pakistan jab drive under Vax Alliance. But Pakistan guys are saying that the Sinopharma is no good for above 60 years of age. Who's got India's policy? 100,000 Mauritius, 50,000 Seychelles, 500,000 Sri Lanka, 500,000 Afghanistan, 1 million Nepal, 150,000 Bhutan, 1.5 million Myanmar, 2 million Bangladesh, 100,000 Maldives, besides the Brazil and Morocco. That's the important part, folks. Jai Hind.